Welcome to the resume review series where I review the resumes that you submit. And in this video, we're going to go over a senior software engineer's resume. And like the other resume review videos that I do, this is going to be my feedback. It's not going to be a resume roast or making fun of this person by any means. So I'll provide what I think this person's doing well and the opportunities to improve. So if that sounds interesting, just a reminder that you can submit your resumes at devleader.ca. Let's jump over to this person's resume and check things out. I like to start by going over the format of this resume, and I think that's going to be a little bit telling about how I'd like to spend time on this particular resume, because I think there's a lot of interesting, good content here, but I think the format and the structure of this is going to be something that I have the most feedback on. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we'll see that on the first page, we have professional highlights and professional skills, so an entire first page without really getting into sort of split out work experience. And then if I go on to the next page, you can see as well, the first half of this is going to be about professional skills. Then we have the relevant professional experience kind of broken out into this bulleted list here. Let me switch over to getting some highlighting going on here. So like you can see this part here, right, is where we have sort of just the work experience. We do have volunteer experience, so that's great to see as well. And then some education and certificates. So overall, we have this format that really kind of pushes the professional experience in terms of like the timelines and organization towards the end. And it almost seems like it's not an afterthought, but it seems like it's separate from the rest of what's documented here. And I think personally, my biggest piece of feedback with this whole resume is going to be to change this. And I don't think that it's because it's wrong to do it the way that's presented here, but I don't think that it's sort of the common format, and I think that it makes it a little bit more difficult to understand. I will go through some of the content in here and talk about the things that I think are done really well, but the thing that I'd like to focus most of our time and attention on is that when we split out sort of the details of the work experience from a section that's like this professional experience part down here, the biggest problem is that even though in some cases we have some of these, skills and experiences referencing some of these professional work experience sort of timelines, the challenge I find is that there's a lot of cognitive load for me to have to jump around and understand really what's going on. And I think that sort of the typical format we have on resumes, I'm calling it typical because this is the most typical thing that I've seen on resumes, where we have this reverse chronological order of where you've spent time and the sort of contributions and impact that you've had there. I think that that does a really good job of telling sort of the experience and story that you have for all of your professional activity, and doing it in this other way organizes it into thoughts, but I can't really see the progression in the timeline, which for me is quite confusing. So overall, what I just want to sort of drive home with this resume for feedback is that I would really like to see a lot of the stuff that we're about to go over sort of added into this section, and I would really like to see this section with the details being the core focus of the resume. Personally, to me, that tells the most clear story. And what this person might find is that some of these other experiences that are a little bit older, so these are going back at this point 10 to 15 years, right? Some of these things, they might not be totally relevant anymore, right? Like you can drop some of the older stuff off your resume if you're looking to get a little bit more real estate back. So having something like junior Linux administrator from 2010 might not be very relevant anymore. Or maybe I think all of these last three or some of these positions are at the same place. You might be able to collapse them and have like a small point and then focus all or most of your effort into sort of like the more recent positions where you have the most relevant experience. But having it organized in a reverse chronological format, for me, is going to be the most effective way to understand kind of like how the career has progressed and how you're sort of taking on usually what you would see as more sort of advanced focus areas in software engineering. And for those of you that are not yet software engineers and you might have some previous experience that's like, maybe you're working as an intern or something totally unrelated to software engineering, kind of seeing that progression, and then maybe you are transitioning over to software engineering, you can kind of see a bit of that story unfolding a little bit more naturally. So overall, that's the main takeaway, but let's kind of focus on some of the other things that we have in this resume, because I think there's some really good points called out here that like highlight that this person has had some interesting experiences, right? So professional highlights, we can see, being able to focus on some AI development. So AI, vector stores, LLMs. We have AI Copilot. I'm just going to kind of scroll through here because there's a lot of this where we can see market research and getting you innovative services off the ground for this AI team. Talking about a project again, like I have a lot of it redacted, obviously, so you can't see all the details, but learn and implement LLMs, vector, there's a typo there, but minor detail, obviously proofread stuff. It's very easy for things to escape, but vector stores, if we keep going, it might be called out a little bit more lower. Oh, I guess in some of the technology, some of these things are called out, right? Agentic LLMs, prompt engineering, lang change, vector store embeddings. So we see that this experience is kind of spattered across the resume. So it's good to be able to call out some of the technology, some of the focus areas. And of course, with so many things being focused on AI now, this I think is a really good thing to be able to call out and say like, hey, look, I have some experience with this stuff. But again, like one of the challenges, and like I see this a little bit more clearly in the unredacted version, is like when some of the things are called out, like those areas I was highlighting, if you were to have this unredacted, you could see like, okay, let me jump down to the professional experience. And this is why this becomes a little bit confusing, is then you go, okay, okay, and then, oh, you applied that in, these positions or in this time frame, right? So you have to keep doing that with some of this experience so it feels very disjoint, even when it is not redacted. So this is more of like for the reader who's trying to review this resume, it makes it challenging to understand the story when you have to jump around and kind of piece things together. So I'm just trying to explain that a little bit further. Let's see what else we have here. Leadership, right? Manage a technical team with a $2 million budget. I like this kind of thing for explaining some scale, right? So like you had influence, you were responsible for something, right? Experience in planning, coordinating, and execution, cross-team initiatives. Excellent. Right. But like even on this one, where was that? Like what did that entail? If we go a little bit lower, if I can still find it, managing a technical team with a budget around 2 million. This is just a quick note that like sometimes the duplication is assigned, like kind of like when you have code like this, you can go refactor things. You may not need to explain the same thing several times. It might just be an indicator that you have an opportunity to reorganize a little bit. You can't see it because it's redacted in this part. It does mention where that is, but the challenge is that like I still don't really understand that because it's not a cohesive story. So managing a technical team with a budget of that, cool, it's excluding people. So what did that include? Right? Is that just $2 million in software? Is that in spend for cloud compute? Is that in like what's involved with that? Like, what did you have responsibility over if it wasn't for people? Again, it just makes the story a little bit less cohesive to go navigate. We can see like communication. If we have leadership and communication, this kind of stuff called out, these will tell similar stories about the type of impact you were having sort of at a larger scale. And sometimes we can see like, I mean, this one is talking about leadership, peers, vendors, potential clients. I think always really awesome if you can call out as a software engineer where you were interfacing with leadership roles and especially with clients if you have any of that experience. I think it's pretty unique because not a lot of developers will have that. Some developers, especially in startups and things like that, may get some of that exposure, but I think some people go their entire career without it. So if you have it, include it for sure. But on the communication part, if we go down a little bit lower, I'm pretty sure mentoring associates for personal and professional growth, like this kind of thing, I think is really awesome to see if you have it as well. Recognize an informal team leader, providing direction, clarity, and confidence in decision-making. So there's a few things that if we tie that back up to the communication up here and the leadership, like this starts to tell a story. But as you can see, I'm jumping around on the resume and I would really just like to see that story told a little bit more cohesively. That's all. I think that might be it on that one. So let me get rid of those highlights and go back up. And then we have like more technical stuff, right? Innovation is part of the technical part, but we also have just a straight up technical thing called out here. And I think what's great that this person's able to showcase on their resume is experience in software development as an SRE, design for scale, high availability. They talk about, I mean, it's not called out right here, but they talk about DevOps, like DevOps team, leader of the DevOps team. They have in my opinion, a nice sort of spectrum of coverage for different parts of software development, which is great. Even if we go back to their work experience, right? System administrator, DevOps, DevOps. They have a founder position, so they've started something on their own. We have more DevOps. We have a technical lead. We have a senior product developer. This person's been able to kind of show that they're going from like what I might call like managing resources to managing some infrastructure into more of like a software development focus. It's not that these things are mutually exclusive, but you can kind of see the focus kind of changing as they're going along. But again, like, we have that information here. I know I'm repeating myself, but it would be really nice to see some of like the technology and experiences kind of working in that reverse chronological order. Let's get rid of some of those highlights. I think the other thing I just wanted to focus on is like this part right here. I think it's great when you can call out, having like a section where you have your skills or technologies and stuff like that, because depending on where you're applying to, they are going to have systems that will look for keywords. Even if it's a human, someone who is a recruiter or going through a lot of resumes, they might be kind of going, okay, like I know that I'm trying to look for a developer that has some experience in these areas. So keywords can always help. I don't think that you want to just like, stuff a resume with tons of keywords until it's really nonsensical and someone can't make sense of it and not understand what's going on. I don't think that's happening here. That's not how I feel when I read this. But what I think, again, would go really well, and I've said this on other resume review videos, let's just pick one for example, like authentication and authorization right here, right? Where do you have this experience? Like what kinds of things were you building? Because I can't tell when it's listed in a section like this. It's good for having like a keyword get identified, but I don't know where you had AWS single sign-on or Azure Active Directory or OAuth or IAP. Like, I don't know where you had that and like what that's related to, right? Just to pick on this one, and it's not my intention, like I'm not making fun of this person or anything. I'm just trying to demonstrate broad virtual infrastructure experience. Like, let's just pick Kubernetes, right? Kubernetes. I don't know what you did with Kubernetes. Was this like a one-time thing that was like in a week you turned on Kubernetes for something? Or like, is there a project that you can sort of show in your work experience, going back down here, right? Can you show some of that work experience calling out a project that leveraged some of this stuff? I think to me, that's the most clear way to show just how much experience you have with some of these things. I realize that's not trivial all of the time, but I think that it tells a more clear story, because when I read some of these lists or sections that have a lot of just technical skills called out, right? Software development, for example, C#, Python, it says, etc. I'm left kind of trying to assume what this means. Again, I've said this in other resume review videos. If you're leaving the reader to start assuming things about your experience, there's other resumes that will be making things more clear. It sounds kind of silly, I guess, but like when you have to put a little bit more effort on the side of the person interpreting your resume, it's just extra cognitive load, and odds are they're probably not just going to be assuming, oh, C# and Python, they must have, decades of experience with this, right? Like, I don't know that. There's no way to call that out. And yes, of course, in an interview, we could dive into this a little bit more. But like I've tried to remind people, if you have resumes and they're competing against each other, if someone else has been able to make it very clear, they also have C# and Python, and maybe we're looking to hire someone with C# and Python experience. If someone else has made it very clear that they have lots of C# and Python experience in the related projects, compared to having a line item that's like this, I have to sort of assume or try to, make up what this person might have done or wait for an interview. If that person might not have that chance for the interview, if there's other people that have resumes that have been more clear with that experience. I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. I think this person, based on the amount of content and different technologies and these different roles that they have, I think they probably have lots of great experience. But I would really like to see it kind of tied together more cohesively in a story, and making this section sort of the biggest focus by pulling in all of this stuff that we see in the rest of the resume into this core section. And then maybe, a small, very brief section that tries to even maybe this much, right? kind of calling out some highlights, I think could be pretty interesting. I've mentioned before, I do like having a little brief summary like this, but we have a summary, like a brief summary, then we have another brief summary, and then we have like, this is summaries across different sections, and then we have skills called out in a list. So it's almost like not a lot of storytelling of experience and a lot of little summaries. So I think we have a lot of the right ingredients, but I think the format, like I said at the beginning of this video, is probably my biggest recommendation for this person to revisit. And I think they have a lot of solid experience that they can tie together. So I hope that you found that helpful. I hope this person has some takeaways to consider. And again, I'm just one person. This is my perspective when I read through this, and in terms of how clear it is when I'm going through this person's experience. So if you want your resume reviewed in a similar way, of course, just submit it to resumes@devleader.ca, and I'll be happy to try and go through it. So thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next one.